Song of Songs. It's one of three books that Solomon is credited with writing. If you ever look and you do a study on Solomon, his birth is recorded in 2 Samuel 12, 24, and 25. It says this. He said, David comforted his wife Bathsheba and went into her and laid with her, and she bore a son, and he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him and sent a messenger by Nathanael the prophet and said to call him Jediah because of the Lord. So this is David and Bathsheba's second son. Bathsheba and David's relationship, marriage, kind of had a rocky start. David had an affair with the married woman, had her husband Uriah killed. God, through that, they lost their son, their firstborn, and through that time, so David married Bathsheba. They had a second son, that would be Solomon. Solomon is David's 10th son of 17 or 19, depending on where you catch that at. 2 Samuel 3, 2 Samuel 3, 2 through 6, and 5, 14 through 16, give David's sons, and there's a little discrepancy there. So depending on which passage you go with, David either had 17 or 19 sons, and so Solomon would be his 10th son. Solomon came into reign after David's death. Here's the problem that I get. So let me do this. Solomon was, as an author, wrote Song of Songs, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes. Those three. 1 King 4:32 reports that Solomon composed over 3,000 proverbs. His songs numbered into the 5,000s. He's also credited with writing Psalm 72 and 127, which mentions him in the title. And also Psalm 127 is his vocabulary, So Psalm 72 is mentioned in the title, and 172, his vocabulary and concepts are with the wisdom there. The problem with going into Song of Psalms, and yes, Solomon wrote it, is this beautiful book, is this beautiful poetry, and where are the rest of my notes? This is not good. Hold on. I wrote all these notes out and it didn't transfer over. Give me a second here. So as he wrote all these books, right? So Solomon, we look at this, and Song of Psalms was written around 900 BC. His name is in there 6 times. He's credited with authoring it. And it's this beautiful love story and poetry about the marriage, right? Only problem with that is, what marriage, right? I mean, it's looking at Solomon. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So exactly 700 wives of royal birth. I'm sorry. Let me quote the Bible correctly there. 700 wives and 300 concubines. But you're right. But which wife is he writing to, right? I mean, this is supposed to be the biblical picture of the marriage, of a biblical marriage, right? And my man was married 1,000 times. I'm just saying, no. I love my wife and I don't want another one. Just saying. But so we look at this, and most scholars agree that the Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon, whatever name you want to call it by, it is a composure of a bunch of poems put into one that shows the love between a bridegroom and his bride. And no, I understand why Jewish people do not allow people under 30 to read this book. right? Because like as I was studying for it this week, I'm like, yeah, okay. But I mean, going into this and looking at this, there are three different interpretations of this book. You can look at it three different ways. And I'm not going to lie, the allegorical approach, and it is, and for Jews and for some Christians and for some Catholics, that's how they look at Song of Songs, is the allegory approach, because you don't want to look at the Bible being sexual, right? And let's be honest, the Jews read Song of Songs during Passover and as a demonstration of God's love for Israel. No. I mean, like, I'm sorry. It just doesn't fly, right? Like, no, that's just kind of weird. And then, but I can't make fun of the Jews without making fun of us, right? Because we look at it, early Christians and early Christian fathers who did not want to look at this sexuality in the Bible as a good thing, looked at it as Christ's love for the church. Jimmy, don't even start. If you're under 30, you got to leave. So so early Christians looked at it, and I'm talking early Christian fathers like Augustine, looked at Song of Songs as Christ, as the man being Christ and the woman being the church, which I can almost see that until we start talking about gazelles. And then it just doesn't fly that way. And mountains. We'll get to that in a minute. It just doesn't happen, right? And then Catholics, which I was one, so I can make fun of, they look at it as God's love to Mary. And that's just twisted. Like, there's nowhere in the New Testament that even comes into play. And the reason I'm saying this is because when you read the New Testament, there's no mention of that. There's no mention of those allegorical approaches to that. So it's just, and I get it, and there's some, and I get why the allegory approach is so helpful to some people, right? Because it's just that, well, it's not really, maybe it's an interpretation, maybe it's some symbolism of what it is, you know what I'm saying? Which there is some symbolism, it's just symbolism of something totally different than what you think. So what you're trying to make it say. And the topographical approach is the study, again, of those symbolisms and everything else. And then the approach that has really come into favor as of the New Testament and modern day is the literal approach, where you're taking it for what it says. And if you've ever read it, it's hard not to take it in that effect, right? It's hard not to look at Solomon looking at the Shulamite woman, someone he cares about, someone that he actually loved, not a foreign wife, but someone that he was supposed to marry, right? Solomon got in trouble for marrying those 700 other foreign wives, because in Deuteronomy, God told his kings, don't marry outside of Jerusalem, marry your people. And so you can almost see this as Solomon. I really hope, and look, and I want to make this very clear. This is me saying this. The Bible does not make this clear, okay? But I really want to hope this is Solomon's first love, right? That first love, the woman that he's supposed to marry, the woman that he's supposed to be with, the woman that God had for him, right? And this is his love letter to her. This is how I've always read Song of Songs. It's his first love, right? We've all had that first love in high school. Some of us didn't marry her. Thank God. I'm just saying, man, like my first girlfriend is a hot mess. I'm glad I didn't. Look, I praise God for unanswered prayers, because if you don't know that song by Garth Brooks, look it up. It's a good one. But, so the problem with it, and here's the issue, and if I'm being honest, here's the issue with reading, for us reading Song of Songs. Some of the wordplay, some of the meaning, some of the poetic licensing is lost on us, right? Right? Hey, Gene, I want you to do me a favor. Tell Nyla that her nose looks like a tower. Right? It's not going to fly, right? Right? When you do, duck. I'm just saying, right? But that's the wordplay, you know what I'm saying? So we lose some of that wordplay. We lose some of those pictures that Solomon was painting when he was falling in love with the Shulamite woman. All right, I killed about 30 minutes. Now I got to get started. Dang it. Should have talked slower. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Remember that old commercial? Whenever the guy walks into the kitchen and his wife's on the stove, and he goes, you smell so good. What are you wearing? She goes, it's not me. It's Campbell's bean and bacon. Remember that? Like, what kind of twisted dude are you that you think your wife smells good if she smells like bean and bacon? Like, anyway. Huh? Bacon's good, but if you ever mix it with pork and beans, it's not really the best smell in the world. This is his early writings. So most scholars believe that Solomon lived from about 920 BC, 980 BC to about 920 BC is, give or take a couple 20 years. And this would have been at his early reign. So when you look at it, when you look at his books, Song of Songs would have been his first book he wrote. Then he would have wrote Proverbs as a little older man. And then Ecclesiastes is at the end of his life when he's regretting everything he's done in life. So that's why, like I said, the Bible doesn't say this, and this is Barry praying that this is what this is Solomon's first love, the Shulamite woman. And I always, again, I'm going back to this is Barry reading into the Bible. Remember when David was at his deathbed? Just go with me. Remember when David was at his deathbed and they found a Shulamite girl that was a virgin to keep him warm and stay with him until he died? And then Solomon's brother Absalom wanted to marry her, and David had said, don't kill your brother, forgive him of his sins. And then his brother went to Bathsheba and was like, hey, talk to Solomon and see if I can marry the Shulamite woman. And Solomon killed him. You only kill your brother over a woman you love. Yeah. I'm just saying. So this is me reading in the scripture. It doesn't say that that's her. I've always wondered if the Shulamite woman was the woman that was the virgin that was with David. Because the Bible is clear that that David didn't sleep with her. She just kept him warm and cared for him in his old age until he passed away. And I really wonder if that's who Solomon wrote this to, would have been that woman. That's just how it works. Again, I can't biblically back that up. It's just makes sense to me. All right, let's go. Stop it. Okay, so we are actually going to, the first part of Song of Songs, we start off in verse 2, 15 through 3:5. So I'm just going to read it and we'll catch it. Catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyard, our vineyard that is blooming. And then the woman starts talking. She goes, my beloved is mine, and I am his. He browses among the lilies until the day breaks and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle, of like a young stag on the rutted hills. All night long on my bed, chapter 3, all night long on my bed, I look for one my heart loves. I look for him, but did not find him. I will get up now and go about the city through its streets and squares. I will search for the one my heart loves. So I look for him, but I did not find him. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. Have you seen the one my heart loves? sacredly. Scarcely, thank you, I cannot read today. Scarcely I had passed them when I found the one my heart loves. I held him and would not let him go till I had brought him to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelle and by the does of the fields, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. Okay. Thank you, Solomon. Appreciate you. All right. Solomon is giving this, right? And when you look at verse 15, before verse 15, it almost sounds like if you hit 13 and 14, he almost sounds like a peeping Tom. He's hiding behind the wall. He's staring at her. And like when I read it, it's like, man, that sounds like a little pervert. Anyway, but, right, he's searching for her. He's looking for her. And even in this description of the Shulamite woman, she talks about that the sun has kissed her skin, that she's brown, because the sun has kissed her skin because her brothers were mean to her, and they made her go and tend the vineyard. So she knows this vineyard, right? And Solomon is there, and he's looking at her, and he's falling more in love with her, and he asks, and it's springtime, and the vineyard is in bloom, and there's all these things, and he asks her to take a walk through the vineyard. Like, one of the things I really like is driving to Albuquerque and kind of in the springtime, right? And they have those vineyards on the side of the road. And they're very pretty, right? The flowers and the little grapes, and you can just see them. But think about green, like green grass that's underneath the vineyards, like instead of the brown, right? The green grass, and it's that flower time in the springtime. The winter's just ended, and it's that picture of a new love blossoming. Right? And whether you believe that it's a literal vineyard that him and her walk through, or it's just the symbolism of spring and the blossoming and the fruit and all these things coming together, I want to say that it's a vineyard and they're walking through it, because the literal approach, the easiest translation of the Bible is normally the truth, right? So if God says through Solomon that they walk through a vineyard, I want to believe they walk through a vineyard because it's the easiest way to look at it, right? So they're walking through this vineyard, and they get into this conversation, and it's this, catch for us the foxes, the little foxes that ruin the vineyards while our vineyards are in bloom. And what it is even in Solomon's day, these little foxes would come in, and these animals would come in, and they'd hide among the bushes and the thorns and everything else. They would gnaw on the vines, and they would destroy it. And at first, you couldn't see the damage that they were doing, but the more they gnawed on them, the more they ate on them, the more they crept in, the more they would destroy the vineyard. And by the time you noticed it, they were gone, right? Like, you couldn't save the vineyard. There was no way to exterminate the foxes because they were just so embedded. And what that relates to, and that's one of the things that it talks about here, is one of the things that it was relating to is like in our marriages, right? We have those little things that creep in, that walk in, that kind of gnaw. They're not really noticeable. They're not really obvious, for lack of a better word. But they happen. And for me and my wife, it's the little things that we don't talk about. It's the little things that just kind of keep building up until one day it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? Everybody just explodes. For both of us. And it's not that it was that little thing that I'd done for the 100th time that was bad. It's just everything else had piled up, and it was just that was just the last thing that made it explode. And that's what he's talking about here. It's guarding our lives, guarding guarding our marriages, our lives, our relationship with Christ, however and whatever stage you're in, from the little things that destroy us, right? The devil's in the detail, right? We say that here a lot, especially in staff meeting, right? The devils are in the details. Like we go over everything for service. Like the temperature, I know it's cold sometimes, but it's set at a certain temperature, right? It's set so people don't fall asleep, because if it's too warm, people fall asleep. I'm being honest with you. The lighting for the 8:30 service is different than the 9:30, the 9:45 and the 11 service. It's all those little details. The way that even stuff y'all don't even realize, the couches, the way they're set up out there, you'll ever notice that if you walk through the front door, the couches will never extend past the door. You'll have a clean shot all the way down, because that gives you, if that's in your sight, then all of a sudden the church feels full and cluttered. So it's the little details of life that destroy things, right? Whether they're true or not, whether they're real or not, the perception is what makes it true. So whether it be, again, in your marriage, in your relationship with God, in whatever you're trying to do, the little things are what kills you, right? And that's what he's warning about here. Because when everything is going good in our lives, when the vineyard is in blossom and you get distracted by the beauty and the smell and everything else, that's when those little things creep in that we don't notice, right? And we kind of take that step a little, especially in my life, like when everything's going good and I'm not stressing about stuff, it's easy for me to kind of fall away. It's easy for me not to read my Bible in the morning. It's easy for me not to go to the gym, right? Because the gym is part of my quiet time. Like I normally, before COVID, would get up at 5. I was up at 5. I was at the gym for 5:30. And I would put on a podcast or a sermon or something. And that's what I did for most of my quiet time. And then I'd come here and read my Bible or whatever. But my gym time was always a podcast, was always a sermon, something like that, and it helped my day. And now that I got to wear a mask to the gym, you can forget that I haven't seen the gym since March, right? So, but it's those things, because everything's going good right now, and I'm not worried about anything, so I can let that slide. We have a great marriage, so I don't have to set up date night. I have a great marriage, so I don't have to worry about, whatever. Just fill in the blank is what I'm trying to say. And the same thing with our relationship with God. Everything's good. So I don't really have to worry about praying today. God knows my heart. All right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter. It's all good, right? We get in those, even with our kids, right? My kids are doing good, so I don't have to worry about them. Yeah. I'll let you know whenever I get there. My kids are never doing good. But that's what he's talking about. He's like, watch out for those little things in the good times that creep in and destroy the good times. And then he goes on to verse 17. He goes, sorry. I know there's a question coming up here. Oh, yeah, here's the question. So the question here says, what steps do you take so you can guard the relationships in your life? So what are some of the steps that we take? What are some of the things we protect? I have a really bad joke here, so don't make me say it. Yes, ma'am.
I think listening or paying attention to the other person.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
Listening and paying attention to the other person, which is great. Yeah. Yes. Brian made a good point on Sunday, and I want to bring it up. There's a lifetime, in this room right now, right here alone, there's a lifetime of marriages. There's a lifetime of wisdom that people like me, Joe, Josh, like the younger families at those 2 other services need. I ask and pray that y'all would look at some of the connect groups, especially some of the younger connect groups, the young married connect groups, that could use some wisdom. I mean, I was kind of like Brian. I had guys that poured into me back home that I still love and still call. Some have passed away and gone to be with the Lord, but that was invaluable to me. Like knowing to have a resource that I could call that had been through a 15-year-old daughter. You know what I'm saying? Well, like to make that phone call and say, "Help me," and does it get better? And they're like, "Yeah, it does. You just have to weather the storm," right? Like so, just knowing that, guys, and you know. The question here of what steps do you take to guard the relationships in your life? The church divorce rate is the same as the unchurched divorce rate. It's 50%. And right, wrong, indifferent, it is what it is. I can make statistics say whatever I want them to say, but that's a sad statistic. And I really think one of the things is the older generation is not pouring into the younger generation. And I'm not blaming y'all. We're not asking for the help. So it falls on both of us. I'm just being honest. You know, I had an old guy tell me one time when I was looking at marriage, he told me straight up, he goes, "Divorce isn't even a discussion. It's not a word we use in my house." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Divorce isn't a discussion. It's not a word we use in my house. We'll compromise, we'll work it out, we'll get through it, but that word does not come up in my house." And that to this day, and I've been married for 17 years. Stop it. I was married in 2004. 18 years. I don't know however many years I've been married. I don't know. 16, thank you. Oh no, I've been married in 2002. Scratch that. 18 years. 2002, sorry. Came to the Lord in 2004, that's the difference. No, but, so that was told to me 20 years ago when me and Dawn were engaged. And I never forgot. It was an old guy from Mississippi who just straight up looked at me when we were talking about getting married and said, "Divorce isn't a word that's used in my house, and it ain't used in yours either." And again, that resonated with me. That he poured into me, and that's something I never forgot. Okay, so this question of guarding your relationships, this is something y'all have done, and it's something that some of us need help with, right? So please don't leave us out. Yeah. So next question. Okay. So he goes on, he's now the Shulamite woman starts talking. He says, "My beloved is mine, and I'm his, among the lilies." And verse 17 is where I wanted to go. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, turn, my beloved, and be like the gazelle or like the young stag on the hills. And he's looking at this, and the gazelle is that kind of that small deer with these big brown eyes that make them really hard to shoot, I guess, for some people. And it's this picture, right, of a woman and this stag, this deer in the field, rugged and just manly. And these are the pictures they have for each other. And talking about the shadows fleeing at night, and it's guarding themselves to turn from each other until the time is right, right? It's controlling your emotions, right? These pictures of the animals where animals are not human, like I know I get in trouble for this the last time I said this in service, and I still hear about it, but animals aren't human, right? They're not made in God's image. They don't have the willpower to resist their desires. She's using these pictures, or I should say Solomon through her is using these pictures of the gazelle and the deer, and they just do, or the stag, and they do what they do, but humans have the power or the strength to resist that. And she says, turn away, flee from those times until the time is right. And it's that picture that we have the power, because we're made in God's image, to resist those temptations and resist, especially in Christianity. Let's be honest. Like, I'm not going to play this game that the culture doesn't have sex outside of marriage, right? But we are called to be salt and light. We are called to be different. And this is what I preach to the youth. This is what I preach to married, soon-to-be married couples, that you're not part of the culture. You're called to be different. And you have an ability to not put yourself in those situations. And that's why she's saying, flee before the shadows. Because nothing good happens at 11 o'clock, right? I remember my grandpa telling me that. Nothing good happens after 11 o'clock, boy. So I didn't get home until 3, but okay. It's like, Pop, but I got to work till 2. It's like, nothing good happens. I'm like, I know. Huh? Right. I still have to work till 2. So the question in y'all book is, how would you advise a newly married couple to nurture mutual submission through faith? Through trust, I'm sorry. How would you advise a newly married couple to nurture mutual submission through trust? How would you get a newly married couple to trust each other? For me and Dawn, it was easy. We were 2.5 hours apart when we started dating, so we had to trust each other, even though she probably shouldn't have trusted me as much as she did. Story for a different day, because this one's being recorded. So we lived 2.5 hours apart, so we had to trust each other or our relationship wouldn't have lasted, right? And we dated for 1.5 years, almost 2 years before we got married. So, and then she got married and she moved in my house, and then everything was bad after that. I say that I did not enjoy my first year of marriage. I worked 763 hours of overtime my first year of marriage because I had lived alone since I was 18 years old. And then all of a sudden, we get married, go on our honeymoon, and come back, and she's in my house all the time. And I struggled with that. Like, the rules of my house no longer applied. I'm like, but I liked it there. And I make fun of people who have pictures in the bathroom, and what's that thing on my bed? I still don't know what it is. But anyway, so right, like that was struggling for me. Like, and I could have used some advice then. But, so how would, like, this word submission, especially in our culture, is hard. Hard for all of us. Huh? It's always been hard, yeah. Yeah. One of the things that it pointed out in here and that I really, really, really did appreciate is that when it says that means that a wife submits to her husband. A wife submits herself to her husband by affirming his role in the marriage as the leader. Also, it means that her husband devotes himself to his wife by his willingness to give up his personal preference in favor for what is best for her. You know, Dawn likes to throw this out because I say this a lot, especially to the guys in the youth group. It's not when you get married, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And God looks at it that way for men. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And it's a true statement, right, guys? Like, just by being a man, God puts you as head of the household. That doesn't mean you lord it over your wife. That means y'all are partners and y'all walk together. But if she does something, it might not be your fault, but it's your responsibility, right? My kid goes out and breaks a window today. It ain't my fault, but I bet you I'm going to pay for it because it's my responsibility, right? And I think when we take the dominating factor out of, because I've met some wives, like I've got some buddies, And I look at my wife every time we leave their house. I'm like, thank God he married her, because I could not be with that lady. Because she's so dominating. She's so much of a boss over him. And he just sits there and takes it, right? And I'm like, it's just not how my life works. I'm sorry. But when those two things, and they come together, and you're equal, and you're walking through the good times and the bad, I think it's how that trust is built. And I think it's how how you can submit. Because, like, let's be honest, my wife is smarter than me any day of the week. And there are certain areas of our relationship, like when it comes to the kids, she's a teacher. Like, she looks at me and she goes, well, what are we going to do with the kids at school? I'm like, I don't know. What do you think? You're the teacher. Like, you've got an education in this, right? I mean, granted, not that I don't help her, but, like, when it comes to how they're going to do school online or go back to school or stuff like that, I'm like, we have those conversations, and I take her advice and pretty much go with what she says on that one, right? On the other hand, when it comes to fixing the car, I just do it, right? It's like, hey, my tire's flat. And I'm like, okay, I'll go change it. That's just what I'm going to do, right? So we're separate, but we're equal, and we're walking through it together. So how do we get to a place where we can teach other younger families to get there? And slapping them behind the head doesn't work.
So many times, whether we like it or not, our children are watching us. And I think whether we like it or not, they adapt to what they see. And whether we like it or not, they grow up so many times with our good habits and our bad habits. And I think it brings us to the point that, you know what? Somebody's watching me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may not be my child, it may be my grandchild, it may be the kid down the street. We never know the influence that we're going to have on other people.
Yes.
I'll never forget the time I was on the job and I said one of the 4-letter words. And a guy looked me right in the eye and he said, I never expected to hear you say something like that. It taught me a lesson. That's where our kids are. We need to live that life before Jesus Christ. Make mistakes? Absolutely. But we need to live that life. That's why I'm glad to see our church going back to what I call community. I think our kids see us as we laugh, we joke, we cry, we pray for, we lift up those that we worship.
You know, one of the great points you made, and I'm glad you made it, was the kid down the street. Because I don't know if you realize this or not, but the statistic now is 70% of children will go to bed tonight without their biological father in the home. So I guess when I'm saying those newly married couple, like example, our church planner Alex in Phoenix, the one that's about to plant his church, the one that's about to launch, great guy, great marriage, has 2 beautiful little girls. His mom was a single mom. He had to learn from his church family how to be a dad, how to be a man. And it took the church to grow that man. And he's still learning. I'm not saying he's perfect, but he credits, and we've had this conversation, because he credits his church for turning him into the man that he was. Because he didn't have a male influence in his life. His mom and his grandma lived together. And so that's who raised him. So that and football coaches and other people, but they're normally not the best influences. So let's go on here because we're running short. So he goes through chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. and they talk about the restraint, and they talk about all that. And the verse that I want to hit on is, let's see, as she goes through the night, this is a picture of her dream. I'm sorry, verse 1 through 4 are basically the pictures she is dreaming. And because she would have never been caught as a woman in that day, she'd have never been caught outside, even looking for her beloved. And then even talking to the guards. So everybody, all the scholars, everyone believes that this is her dream, that she basically went to bed missing her beloved. She went to bed lonely, for lack of a better word. And she dreamed of him. And in her dream, she got so lonely, she gets up and she runs through the city looking for him. And then the guards find her, and it's this picture of being lost without her beloved. And then they bring her to him, and she finds she finds him. And I have seen the one my heart loves. And then in verse 4 it says, I held him and would not let him go till I had brought him. And check this out, to my mother's house, to the room of the one who conceived me. She didn't take him to her bedroom. She didn't go there with him. She took him to her mother. And it's this picture again of love under restraint until the time is right. And putting those guards around us, putting those things around us that protect us when we shouldn't do something that we should do, right? Or we shouldn't do something that we shouldn't do. You know, I read a book a long time ago by Billy Graham, and it was about having a long-lasting ministry. And one of the things Billy Graham does, which whether you agree with him or not, he won't get on an elevator. He wouldn't get on an elevator with a woman by himself. He wouldn't sleep on the same floor of the hotel with his assistant, if she was a woman. They would sleep on different floors. I'll be honest, I'll get on an elevator with a woman. I'm not that bad, but I won't text a lady without texting her husband. Like I have a youth leader, texting, because that's how I communicate with all my leaders. Like if I have my female leaders, like I won't text them or communicate with them without copying their husband on the text, right? Or if they don't have a husband, Katie Buttiger is one of my great youth leaders. Every text that me and Katie go through, my wife is copied on. And I made that ground rule with Katie a long time ago. And it's not that it's that layer of protection that conversation can never go anywhere because my wife is copied on it, right? I have some software on my computer that one of my buddies in Louisiana is called XXX software, and it's not really it's a software that whatever website I go to gets sent to him. It doesn't stop me from going to any website, but it's an accountability software that sends that to him. Actually, there's like 3 of us in there, and my wife is on mine. So any website I go to, any website that I search, my wife gets a copy of that website. And that was brought up, not for me, but he was struggling with some stuff, and that software came up, and so we came into a group. There was 4 of us, me, Ben, Ron, and Josh, and we were all on that website, and we're still there, and it's been 8 years. We're still on that accountability software together. So every week I'll get an email from XXX software, and it's really funny because it's like XXX software. I'm like, oh. It's explaining to James or David, like, hey, I got an email, and it's not what you think it is. But it's because the name of the church that started is XXX Church, and that's their ministry is to the porn industry. So, but yeah, it's those accountability, those walls, those things that she puts in, and those things that we put in to protect us from doing stupid things. So what are some of the best ways that we can do that, right? Well, what are some of the ways that we can protect ourselves? From all right, guys, I know for some of y'all, it's only take the little blue pill with your wife. I get that. But anyway, That's funny. I don't care what y'all say. Y'all can laugh at me or not. Anyway, yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
My 19-year-old granddaughter
Mm-hmm.
went to work at Lowe's, and she was doing really well, and she loved the job. After about 3 weeks, her immediate supervisor, who's about 35, sent her a text, and he just said hi. That made her so mad. She was so upset. She considered quitting.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of surprised me because when I thought about it, now I kind of understand. But I
Yeah.
was glad that her at 19, had that reaction.
Yeah, there's predators all over the place. So yeah, you're right. And it's again, like I said, for me, I don't text a single woman without texting my wife or her husband in that text. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I agree, Jimmy. I have college kids that help me in the youth ministry, Samantha, Valentino, and all of them. And you can look at my phone. If there's a text to Sam, it's also with my wife is in that group chat. Because for that reason, you know. Yeah. So what are some ways that? All right, I'm going to say this one right here. For Americans 50 years and older, STDs have increased 21% over the last 3 years. So don't think I'm just talking about younger people here, guys. The invention of that little blue pill, there's one for ladies too, and I'm just saying it happens. So STDs are actually on the rise in your age group more than any other age group, according to the CDC. This is not some statistic I made up. This is according to the CDC. So what are some ways that even y'all can protect yourselves?
Well, I think our society is so self-centered instead of being selfless. And in a marriage, if you don't think of your spouse first before yourself, you are going to do those stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
I think that primarily is the first thing when we get married, we're supposed to think of our spouse first. And so if that's proper, then that eliminates a lot of that. But in our world, our horrible, sinful world, that is not what's happening. Everything is about what satisfies me.
Yeah.
Not them.
Exactly. It goes back to Genesis 3, whereas I want to be God. I want to be the God of my life. I want to do what I want to do. You're 100% right. And it's hard to be selfless, to give yourself to your spouse forever. So, yeah. This kind of goes back, and it hits on it here again. It goes back to the animal, the things about animals don't practice restraint, but God's people should, right? Animals don't practice restraint, but God's people should. And as I was doing this, it's kind of that statistic came out, and I'm like, okay, well, this is more. This does apply to y'all, because like at first I read this whole thing, I'm like, how does this work? How does this happen? Like, I hate Troy, but when you read the statistic that STDs are on the rise in your generation, it's kind of insane. Like I'm glad, because when I get that age, I'm going to be glad, but, it hurts a little bit, right? And so what are some ways we can protect ourselves? What are some ways that we guard our hearts and we guard our lives? It's one thing to say, to selflessly give ourselves to our husbands, or our spouse, I should say. But how do we practice it? Yes.
I worked in an insurance office that was all women except for the owner for about 8 years. And some of them were kind of attractive girls, It's not a problem if you have that commitment and you feel like it's a golden rule. How would I feel if she did that to me? If
Yeah.
she was unfaithful to me, would I feel good?
Uh-huh.
No, I'm not going to do that to her.
Yeah.
So don't put yourself in a compromising position. And we would go on sales calls together sometimes and have dinner out with some of the other agents, but you just stay out of compromising position.
Yeah. It's especially nowadays, and I agree with you. 'Cause especially nowadays, I can just like, hey, because like I'm also the FCA director for the area, and I've got a meeting with a volleyball coach next Wednesday. My wife knows, hey, we're going here at this time, and I'm going to be with this lady. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's not a secret of where I'm going to be. You know, so yeah, and I think infidelity, and I think even those things, you're right, putting yourselves in those situations that you shouldn't be in to begin with. So yeah.
You need to be highly accountable to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not keeping your relationship really strong with God, then you'll waffle on these things
Mm-hmm.
and get into trouble.
Yes. Exactly. Yes, sir.
Barry, you lead our young people. Having been through the military, where there are all kinds of temptations, I would think that you have wonderful opportunity to guide men, boys and girls, into the fact that they're going to experience some things in the military that only with their relationship with their family, possibly with their spouse, or with their God, they're going to be able to overcome. Because I don't know about the military now, but I know when I was in, there were some things that I just couldn't believe.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. And honestly, me and Joe were having this conversation, and I'm saying Joe because his little boy's in 7th grade, my son is in 5th grade. And you ain't got to wait till the military. Like, we were talking about it, and kids are exposed to pornography in anywhere from 4th to 5th grade these days. Sometime as early as 2nd grade, depending on the filters, and it's a click away. So, I mean, yeah, we were talking about that the other day, that it's having to have conversations that I don't want to have. You know what I'm saying? It's having to have conversations with middle schoolers and looking at parents and going, because I get in trouble with parents sometimes, like, my kid ain't ready for that. It's like, well, then your kid is behind. You know what I'm saying? Let's be honest, because they've been exposed and they know more than you think they know. But, yeah, you're right, and they have been. Yes, ma'am.
I was at a concert, because I don't know if I ever told you this. He played piano for a high school group, and I was sitting behind a couple of kids, boys. They might have been 6th, 7th graders, and I heard one turn to the other and say, you know, my mom's going to have an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just right there, you know. And they said, why? I said, because she don't want to know. I mean, it was just like, I could hear it. I was sitting right behind him.
Yeah.
And it was so matter of fact, you know. It was just like, oh my gosh.
The great thing that I can say is nowadays is a kids, especially high schoolers and everything else, that is such a no-no anymore. Like I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm not saying that kids, but there's a lot more pushback on abortions now than there was 5 years ago. Yeah, no, I'm telling you, because like there are kids that is like that is the line for them. Like kids today don't have a lot of lines. Like you could talk to a lot of kids and that's their line. Like no, that's killing somebody, and so that's their line. It isn't, just to give you an encouragement that.
I just thought that just in discussing that very thing, you know, not just the fact of what they said, but the fact that they were so knowledgeable about,
Oh yeah.
you know, a matter of fact about it.
That's the thing these days, kids. It's a click away. It's a click away. You know, I tell parents all the time, these things are more deadly than cars. I tell parents that all the time. Like, you would not give your teenager the keys to the car without spending time teaching them how to drive, what to do, and how to do it. But we will hand a 4th grader, a 3rd grader this and tell them to go at it. I mean, and this will destroy their lives as quick as that car will. Because they will do stuff that never goes away. Like, you know, so yeah, it's educating parents as well. But, you know, we live in a culture where it's easier to give them a phone than to take care of them. So my last statement, and this is kind of my last thing, and this is for all the guys in here. Every man wants a biblical wife, right? You want that Proverbs wife, right? But don't forget There's also wives in the Bible that will give you a cup of milk and put a tent stake through your head while you're sleeping. So watch out what you wish for. She was counted as a godly woman. I'm just saying. Watch out what you wish for. It's in the Bible, Jimmy. Don't look at me like that. All right, let's pray, guys, and we'll get out of here. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity to gather, to worship you, and through your word. Father, we thank you for the book of Psalms. We thank you for the book of Song of Songs, that you are edified and you are glorified through the relationship that you have put for all of us. Father, we fail and we fall short, but you are faithful to forgive us and to love us. So, Father, help us to be men and women that encourage others, that give ourselves to our spouses, and love one another as Christians should. Father, thank you for this group. Thank you for this time. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.